Back now with this special expanded edition of the CBS Evening News, America Fights Back. Dan Rather reporting tonight from Washington, and here's some of the latest. On this third night of the war, U.S. officials say Taliban air defenses have been smashed and U.S. warplanes now control Afghan skies. 13 targets were hit on night 2, including Taliban troop concentrations in the north and terrorist training camps. A spokesman for Osama bin Laden said holy war against Americans is the duty of all Muslims, and he called the September 11th mass murders a, quote, good deed. Besides the dead and wounded, New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani said the attacks may cost the city 100,000 jobs and $1 billion in tax revenue. President Bush officially confirmed today to Congress that the U.S. war on terrorism will continue indefinitely, and the president said, quote, it will be lengthy. The president also bristled at Congress for what he considered a serious leak of confidential information. CBS's John Roberts has more about both.
President Bush today declared the mission so far a success, that the skies over Afghanistan are free. But Mr. Bush would not say when or whether ground troops would be called in.
I'm not going to tell you. I think that you've got to understand, we will not share intelligence, nor will we talk about military plans that we may or may not have in the future.
Intelligence is a sore point with the president after someone in Congress leaked the contents of a classified briefing last week. Mr. Bush today blasted such behavior as unacceptable and sent a memo to his intelligence chief sharply limiting the flow of information to Congress.
I understand there may be some heartburn on Capitol Hill, but I suggest if they want to relieve that heartburn, that they take their positions very seriously.
The president is managing the serious business of war well, according to a new CBS News poll. 87% of Americans approve of the attacks on targets in Afghanistan. As important for the lengthy campaign that the president has promised, the public expects a long war. 65% of Americans think it will take at least a year, and 90% want terrorists stopped elsewhere. Mr. Bush even received widespread approval today for his decision to clamp down on leaks from Congress.
He said he was angry. He was angry as a devil. If I were the president, I would have probably sent the same darn memo.
What got the president so incensed wasn't just what was published from the leak, but what wasn't published. Sensitive operational information that so worried the White House that a senior administration official personally requested that it be kept out of the newspaper for national security reasons. Dan?
John Roberts at the White House. On Capitol Hill, Congress heard frightening expert testimony today on the subject of bioterrorism. CBS's Bob Schieffer reports many Americans don't need to hear from experts about bioterrorism to be afraid.
The discovery of anthrax in Florida has left the nation on such a hair trigger about bioterrorism that a subway station in the Washington suburbs was shut down and firemen were called in to hose down the area after a man causing a commotion on a train sprayed police with something from a pump-action bottle. The spray turned out to be cleaning solution. But the station remained closed and several dozen passengers were isolated until tests determined the spray was harmless. Such precautions may be prudent in light of what public health officials told the Senate today. They said a bioterrorist attack would be nothing like the attack on the Twin Towers.
There would be no discrete event, no explosion, no immediately obvious disaster to which the firefighters and the police and the ambulances would rush. We would know we had been attacked only when people began appearing in emergency rooms and doctors' offices.
Nor, the experts agreed, is the country geared to handle an attack.
Based on our contacts with hospitals and hospital associations, we would believe that 500 patients would overwhelm the health care systems of most cities.
I, as a public health official, can't sit here and say, yeah, we're ready, we're prepared. I say to you, we are underprepared.
The panel said getting prepared may require everything from better coordination between public health and emergency officials, currently there is virtually none, to improve food inspection, reintroduction of mandatory smallpox vaccinations, and stockpiling of more vaccines.
Imagine the stockpile running out, the panic and fear that will ensue in this country if we have to tell people, I'm sorry, you weren't in line soon enough.
It was scary stuff, and as one of the experts noted, Congress has heard some of it before. But this time, they really seem to listen. Dan?
Bob Schieffer on Capitol Hill. There are new details tonight about a serious breach of cockpit security yesterday aboard a jetliner on a flight from Los Angeles to Chicago. Just as the government is trying to reassure people that flying is safe, what happened on that flight was anything but reassuring, as CBS's Bob Orr reports.
The incident aboard this American Airlines 767 makes it stunningly clear. Despite promises of tighter security, cockpits in most U.S. passenger planes remain vulnerable to attack.
We actually ran down the aisles of the plane to the front, and we didn't know what to expect.
Chris Fredericks was among the 153 passengers on American Flight 1238 yesterday as it flew from Los Angeles to Chicago. Just 40 minutes from landing, another passenger, Edward Coburn, bolted from his seat and crashed through the cockpit door, screaming that the plane was about to hit the Sears Tower.
The door was kicked open and he was in the cockpit pretty much. So we muscle him out of the cockpit area, and now he's like in this thin little corridor.
Coburn, a man with a history of mental illness, was subdued by passengers and crew members as fighter jets escorted the plane to Chicago's O'Hare. Passengers were angry that promised FAA security changes were not in place.
They don't have the reinforced doors on there. They don't have federal air marshals on the flight. The passengers saved us.
Kill pilots! The FAA, working to recruit and train new air marshals, won't say how many domestic planes are currently flying with armed guards, but sources say it's a low percentage. As for cockpit doors, airlines have 2 months to equip 5,000 planes with deadbolts or protective locking bars, similar to this design. So far, only a fraction of the U.S. fleet has been outfitted.
That means for now, security in the air largely depends on passengers themselves. Even the airlines and the FAA concede until permanent changes can be made, public vigilance and, if necessary, intervention is the last line of defense. Bob Orr, CBS News, Washington.
In northern Afghanistan tonight, United Front forces are preparing for what they hope will be a decisive ground offensive against the Taliban, at least in the north. And they're counting on support from the U.S. and its allies to help get that job done. CBS's Jim Axelrod is in the United Front stronghold in the Panjshir Valley, north of Kabul. Jim?
Unlike the first two nights, tonight has been relatively quiet. 8 or 9 loud explosions early on, and then virtually nothing with the exception of a drone flying over twice hours later. This could be the sign of American success, as one high-ranking United Front official told us before tonight's bombings. Virtually every major military target in Kabul had already been destroyed.
On this third night of airstrikes, the strategy is changing, with the Taliban's air defenses now lying in the rubble of Kabul. U.S. and British warplanes can soon fly lower and slower, targeting Taliban troops.
That will change the balance in the whole war against the Taliban.
The United States and the United Front are now effectively partners in this war. These United Front troops are gearing up for a ground offensive. Dr. Abdullah says they have a promise. The U.S. and Great Britain will act as their air force. It's a partnership that was unthinkable just a few weeks ago.
At this point, do you consider the United Front to be an ally of the United States and the United States to be an ally of the United Front?
I think so. In the war against terror, we are allies.
According to the United Front, the most significant development of the past several days occurred far from here and is virtually impossible to confirm. Some 40 Taliban commanders and 1,200 troops are said to have defected in key regions that would cut off supply routes. If true, that could cripple the Taliban. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, 20 miles north of Kabul.
Jim Axelrod by video phone from northern Afghanistan. There were more violent clashes between pro-Taliban protesters and police in some Pakistan cities today. Fueling the protesters' anger was a casualty report out of Afghanistan, as CBS's Alan Pizzi reports from Quetta, Pakistan, on the Afghan border.
The first confirmed civilian casualties of the air campaign died in last night's bombing raids on the Afghan capital, Kabul. 4 Afghan employees of a UN landmine clearing project were killed when their compound was hit.
They have missed their target. We don't know why they have done this, why they have dropped bomb here.
The U.S. claims its raids are aimed at purely military targets, but people here aren't buying it, and that disbelief is one of the sparks for rioting in Pakistan. Pakistani police were out in force to prevent the anger from spreading, watching over the cleanup of yesterday's protests, wondering where and when violence will break out next.
The Pakistani government thinks authority means majority, one man here said. These protests will show them it's the other way around. That's a message Washington will have to consider too as it presses ahead against the Taliban.
Afghan exiles warn that simply defeating the Taliban won't mean a stable Afghanistan or the end of terrorism supporters.
If there is a vacuum of power, there will be more disorder, more trouble than a fighting situation even.
Taliban spiritual leader Mullah Muhammad Omar's home in Kandahar was reportedly hit overnight. Afghan sources said Omar's uncle and brother-in-law were killed, but he escaped to a town 40 miles away. And in anticipation of more strikes, civilians were stocking up or packing up to get out of town. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Quetta.
While struggling to maintain its balance on a political tightrope, the government of Pakistan has adopted a hard line against the protesting supporters of the Taliban. CBS's Richard Roth is in Islamabad.
Pro-Taliban demonstrators today were outraged at the Pakistan government's moves to crack down. In an effort to take the steam out of their protest against airstrikes in Afghanistan, 3 hardline clerics have been put under detention. But the mullahs who remain say this movement won't be stopped.
There will be millions and millions of people, and you will witness it in a few days if these attacks continue like that.
There are clear signs the government's getting ready if push comes to shove. Stepped up security is part of a sweeping campaign to make sure support for the war on terrorism doesn't destabilize Pakistan's government. And inside the sandbagged offices of the capital, Pakistan's president is taking bold moves to manage events.
I would like to remain a soldier. That's why I'm in uniform here.
A general who took power 2 years ago in a coup, President Pervez Musharraf has just reshuffled his command staff, sidelining 3 generals and the head of intelligence. All were considered sympathetic to Islamic supporters of the Taliban.
By this move, he has strengthened himself, he has consolidated his position and his power base.
He's also cemented his new role as an ally of the West. The U.S. has lifted economic sanctions and promises of aid are pouring in. An expert here says the political scene in Pakistan now boils down to 3 key elements: America, the army, and Allah. President Musharraf has finessed the first 2, he says, and unless the air war drags on, he should be able to manage the third. Richard Roth, CBS News, Islamabad.
Next on the CBS Evening News from Washington, a look at some of the new weapons and tactics the U.S. are using to own the skies over Afghanistan. The complex and what's expected to be long war against terror